Pax et bonum. May God's peace and goodness sweep through your hearts today. Try, my listener, try as much as possible to celebrate each day. Me? Mowing the yard? Yeah, it's a couple hours of work on a really bad ankle with a pretty bad back that aches for the doing. But I try to be mindful, to be thankful I have a foot to walk on. I almost lost it in a teenage auto accident, my left foot. I have a lawn to mow, a lawnmower with which to mow. And I truly believe little gratitudes are a way to practice the presence of God in your daily life. What's that? Yes. Sorry, you guys. Mr. Producer wanted to know if I was grateful for all of his help. Yes, sir. You are a wonderful asset to the whole team. Yeah. And I want to extend a special welcome to my listeners 50 years and older. Podcasting is generally a younger generation thing, so I'm honored to have so many adult, lifelong Christians downloading the show to go a bit deeper into their faith. Welcome, ye old-timers. Hey, if you hear some white noise in the background, it's smoking hot today and the air conditioning's on, so I thought I would record it and risk a little white noise versus record it in sweltering heat. Last week I decried the growing deconversion trend. Caring friend said, "But Ed, doesn't it depend upon the deconverter?" "What do you mean?" I asked. They said, "Aren't there people who are disgusted by the sham kind of nondescript, flim-flammy churches you critique on your podcast? Don't they have a right to be fed up and then leave?" I said, "You know what? That's a great point." And it was a great shot at me, a good critique, so I want to say yes, Tony and Becca, good point. I guess it does depend upon the deconverters. There probably are millions of Duns, D-O-N-E-S's, people who still think of themselves as believers but who are disgusted with showy, glitzy, shallow, silly, trite, glib Christianity. And yes, their critique is warranted. Still, I just gotta say, if you really loved Christ, if you really love your faith, you'll just find another church. You won't just quit and take all your marbles home and stop worshiping the risen Christ. Oh, you guys, nuance. I truly believe nuance is good, and life is full of nuance. The news? Oh, goodness, there are boatloads stacked on top of boatloads to think through on recent news. For instance, I'm elated to tell you that so far 11, and for any freshman listening, that's 10 plus 1, 11 NFL football teams have opted out of celebrating Pride Month. For his part, Donaldus J. Oranges, in his efforts to quash DEI initiatives, he's going to proclaim the month of June as National Title IX Month. Title IX, you'll remember, prohibits sex-based discrimination in education. He's trying to protect women's sports, I'm sure. And I wonder, are we finally seeing the end of the insidious pride movement? Can we please stop seeing males participating in female sports? Yeah. And then, in the U.S. Constitution, nowhere can you find the phrase universal injunction. Senator Ted Cruz is correct when he said having a local federal judge issue an entire nationwide legal stop wasn't one of the checks and balances of the framers that they had for our nation. And look, you know this, if you've listened to me much over the last 9 years, my Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ. But because of violence, suffering, heartache, division, human nature, and the misuse of power, politics matter. Government, the Apostle Paul taught, was God's idea, Romans 13. And me, I've said it many times, I mostly detest the unprincipled Republicans. But I vote for them because they're not as yet openly as godless as the Democrats. Well, here's a party sampler for your snacking pleasure. In the history of the United States during the first 150 years of our nation, there were 0 nationwide injunctions filed. 0. I found this noteworthy. The first nationwide injunction ever was filed in 1963, and even that probably represents a novel shift. Then, in the remainder of the 20th century from 63 to 2000, there were 27 nationwide injunctions. That's an average of 1 per year. Then, during the presidencies of Bush, Obama, and Biden, there were 32, so that was 32 nationwide injunctions across 20 years. Then, how many in the last 2 months? You mean in the last 2 decades? No, I already said that. I'm asking about the last 2 months. Over the last 2 months, there have been 37 nationwide injunctions. This again is from Senator Ted Cruz, and in retrospect, there have been more nationwide injunctions against President Trump than all the injunctions combined of the 20th century. 37 nationwide injunctions by judges in 2 short months. And my listener, those 37 nationwide injunctions comport with the lawfare that was wrought against Trump during Joe Biden's 4 years, wherein President Trump was indicted 4 times. The law was used by the federal government under the Democrats 4 times to try to put Trump in prison. All 4 failed. Failed on legal grounds. So what's happening? Democrats, through the judiciary, are hindering democracy, using the law through judicial activism to hinder and stop the policies and actions of President Trump. Doesn't matter what immigration law is to the Democrats, they will stand for illegal immigrant firebombers, murderers, and human traffickers. Sorry, but it's just true. The Democrats much prefer illegal immigrants to regular old blue-collar, hard-working American citizens. So, we shouldn't be surprised that in nationwide polls the Democrats get a 27% approval rating. That's with NBC. Or it's even down to a 24% rating. That's through The Hill. And where are they losing favorability support? Among registered Democrats. Even registered Democrats have had enough. And me, if their actions didn't cause so much heartache among the families whose loved ones have been murdered, raped, firebombed, economically depressed, and attacked, I'd say, bring it on, Democrats, bring it on. Keep homemade device flame-throwing your hard-working, American-hating, truth-destroying philosophy right down into the courts. Keep doing it. Keep DEI ruining young women's opportunities to succeed in sports because you're only burning yourselves to the ground. Keep on using lawfare to work against what the election results called for: the rule of law, legal immigration, support of biology, nature, common sense, anti-globalism as a philosophy, and for reason. You're standing against reason and truth, capital T, truth, and God himself. Oh, it's just crazy making. What else? This news item is disturbing. The Center for Disease Control, the CDC, reports that young people aged 18 to 44 are having more strokes than at any time in U.S. history. Between 2020 and 2022, 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, there was a 14.6% increase of strokes among young people. What do doctors think are the contributing factors? Well, they say rising rates of obesity, yes. Increased stress, yes. Consuming large amounts of caffeine, energy drinks, yes. I say all that's fitting stuff, but I believe the underlying factors probably are cultural more than anything else. And then what else? I am going to name that which shan't be named. Because, I'm trying to remember. Did we have an event in 2020 that led to millions getting, practically forced upon them, injections? Wow. Could that be at issue? Does the increased stroke rate among the young parallel the soaring percentages of myocarditis we're now seeing among younger generations? Wow, it may only be a correlation and not linked causation, but a pharmaceutical RNA-based injection that did nothing to slow the spread of the disease? Oh, for me, that injection is always in the back of my mind when I hear or read about weird medical trends or the unexpected deaths of younger folk, young people contracting weird cancers. And if it was me who'd been injected, I'd be consulting the spike protein detox post-injection retinue of one Dr. Peter McCullough. What else? I saw a video on X. It was put up by Ian Miles Chong, and it was posted by Hannah Marie F. on a site called Ketchup Bites. I saw a video on X about a young 26-year-old teacher explaining why she was quitting her teaching. She was an English teacher, quitting her new teaching job, and she was only a couple years in. She had earlier, she said, coveted having the job. While explaining that the poor pay was the first reason for her departure, she spent some 9 minutes talking about the deconstructive power of technology on her high school students. She said that because of iPads and iPhones, her students were no longer willing to handwrite simple paragraphs, were no longer willing to read actual books. Well, if they could read, which she says now is actually an issue. Kids are so used to telling their e-device to read something out loud to them that many simply cannot read. She said that she's realized that her students were no longer willing to work hard to learn, and she blamed it on technology. Which, Gersh, reminds me, my cell phone accidentally took a 10-minute video of my shoes yesterday. It was some pretty good footage.
I heard that.
Me, I remember when my own 3 kids were in elementary school, or was it junior high? I can't remember exactly. But the principal was ear to ear grinning excited that they were going to be getting every single child student an in-class laptop. Which, as I think of it, only makes evident how crazes and fads are so darned celebrated inside the hearts of administrators. So little wisdom, so much trendiness, fads galore, fads that start at university. But back to the story. Me, I remember not only being disinterested, I remember being positively against it. Why? Because learning... No, actually, sheesh, it's about human nature. Education is about knowing what human nature is, working with that reality and sculpting it through a committed sense of pedagogy. And so, well, real lifelong wisdom transmitting learning happens inside a person-to-person engagement. Eyes looking into eyes. Souls recognizing authority and wisdom and knowledge, bodies adjacent and sharing knowledge together. Education doesn't happen through a soulless staring out of a computer screen. Education doesn't happen through AI writing your term paper for you. So all of that to say, dear 26-year-old disaffected English teacher Hannah Maria F., you are rightly reading the room. And it's just grievous that neither administrators or the educational system is so prescient as you are. You guys, it is this precise week that makes for 8 years since I left my full-time tenured theology professor slot. 8 years since I stepped out of my last ever university theology class. I cleaned out my dear office. I said bye-bye to a career that had been destroyed by poor leadership. And get this. Over the years, I sent new Patreon subscribers of mine 2 specific podcasts where I explained to them the narrative of my departure. I'm not going to go into all of that today, but I thought I would relate to you the pizza pie chart I made that back 8 years ago. I used distinct percentages help me to explain why I left a job that I once loved with all me heart. Here are the percentages I noted in my journal. I went and looked back 8 years ago. Why'd I leave? The school's bureaucratic swell across my 25 years? 20%. The school's missional drift away from Christ as their center? 20%. The school's celebrated move to embrace political correctness? 20%. And oh my me, since I left, it's moved from political correctness to absolute wokeness. It's just something to watch. The school's disregard for its employees? Oh, constantly we were told there is no money, and then the power brokers would hire scores more of administrators. For me, that added up to 15% of my pizza pie chart, and the pay was terrible for the cost of living in the OC. Then there were the politics of California, 5%. I mean, we still refer to ourselves here in Spudlandia as political refugees, and everyone here gets it. They understand. The cost of living in California, 5%. A feeling of imminent doom, both about the state of the school and what might happen if some big event hit SoCal, 5%. A foreboding sense of personal ennui because I felt stuck and helpless and communityless, and we were visionless. Well, that was 4%. Then there was, to Hannah Maria F's point, a dramatic drop in the quality of student academic performance. As I personally told the president, I had, across my 25 years, gone from teaching college to teaching high school. And this corresponds with, again, that 26-year-old account's video of why she's leaving today, leaving public education. And for me, that was 3%. And finally, there was a drop in the incoming level of students' Christian faith, 3%. So there were all manner of little factors which equated to 25% of my decision to leave, that those probably wouldn't have mattered if those big ones, those first 4 institution culture sort of categories, which for me equaled 75%, the little ones wouldn't have mattered if the big ones hadn't been such an abiding soul suck. All of that to say, God bless each and every one of you who, as I'm speaking, you're engaged in the teaching profession. I'm sending you great big high fives. You are involved in a battle for the church's soul, our nation's soul, and the soul of the future. May God bless, strengthen, and energize you. May He fill you with gumption and creativity and joy, because, my friend, you are in a war that I, despite my 100% best efforts, could not win. Hey, all my unfriends, you want to bless my show? Say a heartfelt prayer for me, for wisdom, for the Lord's timing, and here's a particular way the Lord has blessed me across my entire adult life, say a prayer for Holy Spirit-given bibliography. I have always sensed a specific favor and blessing, and you can call it the smile of God or His face shining on me, but I felt that blessing with regard to bibliography. The Lord has guided me, poured His grace into me, strengthened me, and even spoke quite personally to me through bibliography. I'm planning on writing a book on the eschaton. What will resurrection life be like? I want to write that in the fall, and I want the Lord's bibliographic blessing. But also, you can pray for financial provision and for health and for the Holy Spirit's opening and closing of doors. And please know, I will treasure your prayers. Another big supporter of the UU are the wonderful folks at Gallerini Roofing. Down in SoCal, the OC, LA, even North San Diego, they do residential and commercial roofing jobs. Bonded, licensed, insured, with decades worth of experience, Gallerini Roofing knows how to do the job with excellence and professionalism. Call them at 714-244-6567 and get the job done right. 714-244-6567. That's Gallerini Roofing, a proud sponsor of the Uncensored Unprofessor. All righty. The Sixth Crusade. When last we thought together about the Crusades, we saw that Emperor Frederick II, he of Germania, had negotiated with Sultan Al-Kamil to retake Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Nazareth. But, because we know how impermanent was this era of history, we're not surprised to learn that Frederick only held the Holy Land for 15 years. Having hired mercenaries, Khwarezmians, they were Muslims driven out of Iran by the invading Mongols, Sultan Al-Kamil reconquered Jerusalem in 1244. In the doing, he killed significant numbers of Christians and once again desecrated the holy places. From there, the Khwarezmians joined the Egyptian Muslim forces and annihilated the Christian army at Gaza. I just find that amazing, my listener. Gaza was a war site some 800 years before it was a war site in our own lifetimes. Wow. But this led to still another, the Sixth Crusade, that was called for by the Pope. And folks, think with me. Think political with me. Think international with me. What did the Crusaders have to gain by retaking the Holy Land? They weren't securing any economic interest really to speak of. There wasn't enough olive oil to get rich. There weren't billions of dollars to be made from tourism like we see with Israel today. Israeli garlic and lemon hummus hadn't been concocted yet. Neither were falafels. So sampling street food on pilgrimages hadn't yet taken hold. There wasn't some trade route through Jerusalem, the likes of which would make European kings and nobles rich. There was no monetary benefit, really, to speak of. So, well, what's my point? Their motives were primarily religious. And me, I don't think we contemporaries have any way to get our imaginations around what these medieval Christians were doing. Sorry to say, we Christians today stand for almost nothing. And I dare say we wouldn't and won't fight for much of anything. I mean, we might tweet about human trafficking. We might repost a meme about sex trafficking, but actually doing something, standing up to the government when it says we have to stop worshiping, oh man, that didn't happen much in 2020. Or actually saying something to friends or family or in sermons, actually speaking truth to power, sorry to say, no way, it just doesn't happen. I'm afraid contemporary Christianity is just so whipped. Worse than that, contemporary Christianity is beholden to the spirit of the age. A spirit which says, above all else, you must be nice. You Christians stop saying things about morality. That's not nice. Oh, truly, with all my heart, I believe that spirit of niceness makes us effete, ineffectual, weak, gulp, even saltless. You think I'm being unfair? Email me at uncensoredunprofessor@gmail.com. But the Crusaders and those who supported them, they had verve. They stood for something. They so wanted the land where Jesus lived and died and resurrected to be preserved that they expended great sacrifice. They believed that the state of Jerusalem spoke directly to what God thought of his own Christian people. That's amazing to me. So they sacrificed money and time and their lives even. And again, I say, I admire that. They remind me that there are things worth living for and there are things worth dying for. And here, living in a vanilla goo washed out area of church history, I have much respect, más respeto, for Christians with courage. I admire that. And apparently, Americans used to admire the Crusaders too, right? I've noted repeatedly the use of Crusader, Knight, Lancer for school mascots. They were esteemed for their bravery, character, risk. I mean, did you know that the city of St. Louis, Missouri was named back in 1764? St. Louis, Missouri was named after a man who lived over 550 years prior. Yeah, the key Crusader figure of today's episode, King Louis IX, was esteemed for his humility, piety, bravery, and willingness to sacrifice. A city here in Missouri got named after him, St. Louis. Born in France in 1214 and made king when he was only 12 years old in 1226, Louis led the Sixth Crusade. Established history shows he was indeed a man of deep piety. Even though he was fabulously wealthy, he wore simple clothes. He lived a life of strictly scheduled prayer. Louis awoke each night at midnight to pray the rosary with his royal chaplains. He observed regular fasting. He wore an uncomfortable hair shirt. He even took up the special personal practice of not laughing on Fridays. Apparently, he did that even though he was a man of great humor. He also even went to regular weekly confession, so he was, in his day, a Christian's Christian. In fact, he was so Christian that he was canonized a Catholic saint only 27 years after his death. Well, PiousSt.Louis IX assembled the best organized, best financed, and best planned yet crusade of all the crusades. He forced a severe crusading tax on France, which paid for the army of 2,800 knights, 5,000 crossbowmen, and 15,000 other combatants. He had enough money to equate to 6 times the annual royal income. That was expensive. Louis even planned so that the Crusader army would attack but avoid battle in the early summer season when the Nile flooded, a reality that hurt previous crusading efforts. Then he took his army down south, and after having wintered in Cyprus, which was an established Crusader practice, Louis and his Crusaders landed at Damietta, Egypt, on June 4th of 1249. Now, we talked about the city of Damietta in previous Crusades. They landed there and immediately were attacked on the beach by Muslims. But the Muslim charges were unsuccessful against a solid wall of infantry spears, the likes of which we've seen successfully employed by Crusaders in the past. Again, all of that's a callback to Charles Martel and the Battle of Tours, right? That wall of ice that they packed together so tightly with those infantry spears that when they got charged, the Muslims just got shredded. Well, Louis did this on the beach and the Muslims withdrew. And apparently the city folk in Damietta saw or heard of the defeat, and they just fled. Just like that, lickety-split, Damietta had fallen swiftly, to the great surprise of King Louis IX. Then, instead of marching further toward Cairo, the Sultan's home base, because again King Louis IX wanted to avoid the Nile floods, he decided to set up base in Damietta. What happened to the Crusaders then? Military stasis set in. Apparently, medieval armies don't do well with nothing to do. No cornhole to play, no Yahtzee, no chess. and disputes in the camp set in. Food supplies began to dwindle. Soldiers began to return home to France. And the Muslims were savvy enough to know that they should attack the Crusader food supply routes. So finally, watching his army dwindle, King Louis IX attacked the city of Mansoura a few months later in November of 1249. Now, unfortunately, Louis lost both his brother, Robert, who was a commander, and a sizable amount of troops, including some 300 knights. And this happened on the outskirts of the city, outside the walls, where they did not have the rest of the army with them. The residents of Mansoura were throwing blocks of wood from the windows of the city outside those the windows of their houses, and killed many crusaders. One crusader journalist was hit by 5 arrows, while his horse was hit by 15. So King Louis was forced with a crucible: press on and capture Mansoura, or retreat and winter in Damietta. Author Stephen Weidenkopf writes, quote, "Unfortunately, the king proved the leadership axiom that a bad leader is not someone who makes bad decisions, but someone who makes no decisions." Louis IX chose to hold his army in place outside the walls of Mansoura, with his supply lines exposed to Muslim attacks from the land and the Nile River. For 2 long wintry months, the Crusaders held their spot. Finally, the Muslims attacked and captured carts and stores from the supply line. For King Louis and the Crusaders, the situation became unbearable. Cut off from necessary supplies, the Crusaders began to die from scurvy and dysentery. Scurvy happens when you don't get enough vitamin C. Dysentery, diarrhea, right? On the latter, even the king was affected to the point where the back of his trousers was cut open to deal with the nasty effects of dysentery. Well, at that point, King Louis gave the command to retreat. But it was too late. His forces were tremendously drained and depleted. King Louis sent an envoy to the Sultan in order to bargain for treaty. The Muslim army, observing the Crusader plight, surrounded the pitiable Crusader host and immediately executed all the sick, wounded, poor Crusaders. King Louis and his French nobility were captured and sent to the prisons of Mansoura. The Sultan of Egypt further humiliated the king by sending Louis's captured royal cloak to Damascus, where it was paraded through the city as a war trophy. I've talked in the past about how the Muslim culture highly values symbolism and shame, right? And they would do that to the Crusaders, and they did that with King Louis's royal cloak, much as they had done with the holy relic of the True Cross years earlier. Then what happened? Well, the Sultan, Turan Shah was his name, Shah bargained with King Louis for the release of the not long ago captured city of Damietta. For the price of 800,000 bezants, or more than 3 times the annual French royal income, Louis bought his own safety. During the month of negotiations, the Sultan tried to convince King Louis to renounce his Christian faith and embrace Islam. But in the kind of words spoken that help one become canonized as a Catholic saint, Louis told the Sultan, "You can very well kill my body, but you will never have my soul." And so, the Sixth Crusade ended just like the Second, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Crusades, in ruinous defeat for Catholic Christians from Europe. Of the 2,800 knights who joined King Louis for that Sixth Crusade, less than 450 remained alive afterward. Folks, we will see next week that this wouldn't be the end of future Saint King Louis IX's efforts at crusade. He would remain in the Middle East for another 4 years and then go on to lead the Seventh Crusade. The truth is, King Louis was indeed a resoundingly pious man. Unfortunately for the Crusaders, piety does not equal wisdom in warfare. Louis should never have allowed his recently successful army to be pinioned outside the walls of Mansoura. Oh, the lessons learned, or not. Thanks for joining me. Until next week, hey, tell a friend about a thinking show for disciples. Until next week, please everyone go and turn on your beautiful God-given brains.